Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How's it going?
Pretty good. Good night. I didn't actually end up watching the World Cup game tonight. I actually went for a run instead. I just thought I wasn't desperate to watch Czechia against Korea.
Well, I'm a bit ashamed to say that I still haven't watched either of the World Cup games yet. I was hoping to catch the Mexico-South Africa game today, but work got pretty hectic in the afternoon, and then I ended up learning the score shortly after I got off work. So I did watch the highlights, a couple of red cards.
More red cards than goals.
More red cards than goals. That's the comment I made. But yeah, excited to watch some World Cup matches in these coming days, including Canada's opening one today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's inevitable that maybe we'd creep into a bit of World Cup talk, but that's not the main purpose of our podcast. If you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, what is our podcast, the YYC Soccer Podcast, all about?
So as the name suggests, we talk about soccer in Calgary. We talk about the amateur, post-secondary, and professional teams, pro teams being Cavalry FC on the men's side and the Calgary Wild on the women's side. But we certainly don't shy away from any other topics that relate to soccer in Calgary.
In this episode, our topics are going to include a review of Cavalry FC's match this week against Inter Toronto. We'll talk about the Calgary Wild. They're off to Halifax to play the Tides on the weekend. We'll talk some Alberta Premier League. And we have an interview this week. Scott, who's our interview with?
Yeah, I had a conversation recently with Gord Franson, who is the team manager for the University of Calgary Dinos men's soccer team. Kind of a different type of guest than we've had on in the past. Hey, Jason.
Yeah, he's like a legend. Like he's been doing it for 39 years, I think, in the interview, and you know he's an encyclopedia of Dinos and Canada West soccer history.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've known Gord for a long time, as I referenced in the interview. I actually met him when I went to the U of C back in 2012. And at that point, he would have already been in his role for more than 25 years. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody knows more about the men's soccer program at the U of C than Gord, who really is, one of the guys behind the scenes alongside Eddie Bardana. So yeah, great to chat with him and hear his perspective on post-secondary soccer and the development of the Dinos soccer program over the years and its kind of continued evolution.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll get to that interview in a little bit. We're going to kick things off with Cavalry FC.
Hi, everyone. This is Nate Edwards. You're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So, Jason, I predicted that Cavalry would have a tough time out in Ontario taking on Inter Toronto at York Lions Stadium on Wednesday evening, a rare midweek game that came just a few days after both of these teams played their most recent matches. I couldn't have been more wrong. Cavalry ran through Inter Toronto, winning 5-1 and having a pretty easy evening, it looked like.
They shredded them. I watched the game. It was just, I don't know, it was weird watching. It reminded me a little bit almost of that game, that 8-0 game against Valor all those years ago. Toronto just looked horrible. I don't even know what else to say.
I think they, I can't say that I watched this game, Jason. Full disclosure, I relied on the extended highlights, but based on those, I mean, it looked like Toronto got their tactics completely wrong, and they were also playing very lethargically, perhaps due to the fact that they played a game just, I think, 2 days before this. But they employed a really high back line, and Cavalry just, every time they were in possession, it seemed like they had an opportunity to play a through ball. They had multiple breakaways, I think 3-on-2s, 4-on-3s, numerical advantages in the attack. And Toronto's midfield took ages to get back on defense. So they really weren't helping out their back four. But yeah, it probably was a fun night to be a Cavalry winger or forward because you had acres of space to work with behind the Toronto back line.
It was like Gauthier Natigny was on the field all by himself half the time. There's nobody near him. And Inter Toronto, they brought in Ollie Bassett and Batty Bonga there, and for about 15 minutes or so, they actually looked decent. But I don't know. I don't really understand how Cavalry was so effective on that counter, yet it didn't seem like Toronto could do anything about it. It kept happening over and over and over again. And I think the numbers were 20 shots and 13 shots on target, and the XG was like over 5. They just played around with them sometimes. Like those goals, well, we can talk about them a little bit, but a lot of them were plays where players were open, it wasn't just a real bunch of tight defending and some was able to punch the ball in. They were all like somewhat picturesque goals.
Yeah, it looked like one of those games where the pros take on the APL team and just kind of walk through them, right? And not suggesting that Inter Toronto is an APL team by any means. Actually, before this match, they looked really impressive this season, and we're in third place, right? They've actually dropped down as a result of this loss. I think they're now in fourth place. But coming into this game, they looked good. And like you mentioned, Ollie Bassett, I've always been a fan of his. Mario Eustachio seemed to put together like a really good, a really strong team that was hard to break down. And not that long ago, they played Cavalry to a 1-1 draw at Spruce Meadows. So fully expected them to give Cavalry a battle on their home pitch. And for whatever reason, they just capitulated. They collapsed.
One thing the One Soccer commentator said is they said after they lost that match in the Canadian Championship, this team's never looked the same for whatever reason. I'm certainly in no position to debate that or counter that because I haven't watched Inter Toronto nowhere nearly enough. But that was a comment that was made, and I thought that was kind of interesting. But the other thing I don't understand is Ollie Bassett still isn't fit. Like, they said that he's still not match fit from we're 10 games into the season. Like he signed before the season started.
Yeah.
And they didn't imply that it was an injury. So how is he not match fit? They're almost halfway through the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, regarding the commentators' comments there, Jason, he kind of has a point because I pulled up their record and that loss to Saint Laurent was on May 10th. And since then, they did beat Pacific 1-0 on May 17th. But having watched Pacific this season, I think to only win by 1 is kind of a disappointing result. And since then, they haven't won, right? They drew Halifax Wanderers 1-1, and then they lost 3-1 to Supra. And then they lost pretty heavily 4-1 to Forge before this game. So actually, they've conceded 12 goals in their last 3 games. So maybe I have to take back what I said about before this game. They actually look pretty strong because, they're in a pretty bad run of form.
For sure. Let's quickly run over the goals. Tobias Warshevsky scored the first one, I think it was 10 minutes in. Sergio Camargo tapped one in to make it 2-0. Nathaniel Edwards, he pounded home that goal. He was sitting all by himself there in front of the net. And then, Levi Lang had a tough go of it there. That was unfortunate, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was an own goal that Lang scored. Was it a corner kick or a free kick?
Corner
he got
kick.
His head on it. Yeah, he got his head on it, and just rather than directing the ball away from goal, it just kind of sailed into Cavalry's net. That made the score 3-1, but I don't think that Toronto had any chance, even after scoring that. I don't think it breathed new life into their attack because Cavalry put the exclamation point on the result not too long afterward with, I believe, was this Kanija Elba's first goal of 2026, Jason?
Geez, it seems like he got another one, but maybe it was in the Canadian Championship. I don't know, but what I will say about it, though, is we've commented that he's missed some relatively easy chances. This was a great goal.
Yeah, this was the best goal of the night. It was a long distance strike, placed the corner, picked the corner really well, drove it down low, and good to see him get on the score sheet. And then Nico Moroniak in stoppage time getting, I believe, his first goal in the CPL. I know he scored against Edmonton Scottish in that CanChamp game last year.
He scored against Vancouver, I think. He has scored against Vancouver, I think, at some point. I don't think it's the first CPL goal, but it might be his first goal this season. But anyway, really nice goal on his part, and him and Gauthier Tigny worked it well together and stuff. So bottom line is it was a really, really solid game, and Cavalry goes into the break on a real high. They're still in second place, though, because Forge won their match on Wednesday night as well. So Cavalry's got 23 points in 10 games, and Forge is still 2 points ahead of them.
Yeah, and Jason, before we started recording, we were talking about how does this start to the season compare for Cavalry when you think about, their previous best seasons. So if you think about 2023 when they won the Canadian Premier League Shield by finishing first in the regular season, but also in 2019, the inaugural CPL campaign when they started so strong, winning like the first 7 games of the season. So we were kind of surprised by what we found out when we dug back into the archives a little bit.
Well, for 2023, I kind of forgot about how slow the start was that year. They had like 5 draws in a row, and after 10 matches, they only had 12 points. But when you look back even to that first season, and that was when it was divided, the season was divided into 2 halves. And the end of that spring season, which was only 10 games, the amount of points, almost the same, right?
Yeah, they had 8 wins and 2 losses. So that's 24 points. So just one more than they have in their first 10 games this season. And yeah, that 2019 game, they started with 7 wins on the bounce, and then they lost to Forge, and then I think they beat York 9, as they were called then. And then in their last game of the spring season, which I actually went to, Jason, out on Vancouver Island, they fielded mostly their bench players, guys who hadn't really played that much until that point, and they lost to Pacific. I can't remember the score, but yeah, I mean, 2019, if we think about how dominant Cavalry were, only 1 point more at this point of the campaign than they have this year. So that really is a testament to how strong they've been in 2026.
And we've talked about, I know you've mentioned it a few times, about how it seems like it's kind of a 2-horse race. And then, we were suggesting before, well, Inter Toronto is not that far behind, but now it really is a 2-horse race. Like you look at Forge with 25 points, Cavalry with 23 points, and then in third place, you have to go 9 points further down to Ottawa at 14.
Yeah, and they've also played 10 games. Inter Toronto do have a game in hand, so if they win their next game, that would put them on 15. But again, that's still 8 points back of second place Cavalry. So I think the 2-horse race is starting to shape up. Even with 18 games left, I think it would be quite the surprise if a team other than Forge or Cavalry lift the Shield this season.
Yeah, it's looking like it could be interesting to see who ends up between Ottawa, Toronto, Supra, and the Wanderers for the next couple spots. But yeah, the first 2 spots seem like they're already kind of a done deal almost.
A couple odds and ends we wanted to mention before we talk about the Calgary Wild is that with his goal this week, Toby Warshevsky is leading the CPL Golden Boot race with 5 at the moment. I think he's got a couple of penalties, but he's also got a couple of goals from open play. And Adam Perlman was named U21 Player of the Month. But yeah, he has really picked up his play, I think, compared to the first couple of games of the season.
I thought in the game at Spruce Meadows last weekend, he played really well, but I thought last night against Inter Toronto, he just played great. Like, I don't even know what else to say. He played excellent. I certainly don't think he's played poorly. I think he's played quite well, but I was incredibly impressed with him. And I guess when you're playing a team and you're winning 5-1, lots of players look good. He, in particular, really stood out to me even last night even some of his defensive stuff. There was a play, I don't remember, in the second half where some player was coming and he just took the ball, like as the defender, he just took the ball away from him like they were like a little baby. And that apparently the commentator made a comment that the Inter Toronto player was like on the ground, pounding his fist into the turf. He was so frustrated.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe someone from Toronto FC was in the stands and Adam Perlman had a little bit of added motivation to do well.
I would think so, and probably his family were likely there as well.
Hi, this is Carly Johnson, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So the international break is over, and the NSL is back in action this weekend, and the Calgary Wild are making the long road trip out to Halifax.
Yeah, this will be their first road trip out to the East Coast this season, and a big game for them, right? Halifax is the closest team to them in the standings, so a win would cut the difference down to 3 points, but a loss would put the Wild 9 points back of 5th place. And even though we'd only be 6 games into a 25-game season, Jason, it would be hard to suggest coming back from that and posing a playoff run unless they really turn things around.
Yeah, like I know we've chatted about this offline about when could it be the point where it's too late? And I think we were talking about like end of June, beginning of July, but it might be sooner than that.
Yeah, but I mean, they've had some really good results at Wanderers ground. Think back to last year, so hopefully they'll be able to find a spark and get the result that they so desperately need. Kickoff for this one is at 10:30 a.m. our time, but looks like some of the players who've been on the injured list, Jason, are off of it. So hopefully the Wild will have some of their starting players back full fit for this game.
Yeah, the NSL updated on their website today, Thursday, the injured list of players that are basically expected to play or not expected to play. And I think probably the most notable person missing from that list, Maggie Doherty-Howard. She is not on that list anymore. So I'm presuming that means that she will be available for selection this weekend. You can't say enough about how important that's going to be for the team, also for her talent and also just for her, how she just holds this team together as a leader.
Well, I mean, just look at the results of the two games that she missed, right? 4-0 losses back to back. So even though I think of her as an offensive player first and foremost, I think she also, has a crucial role in terms of leading the team and making sure that they're defensively compact as well, because without her, the midfield just kind of crumbled, and that doesn't help defensively. So what I understood from something a commentator said was that her injury was, I think it was like a wrist or arm injury. So you'd think that wouldn't impact her play too much.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. I think she's going to be playing with some kind of cast or something like that. I think the reason that she was really out for these few weeks was just the fact that she had surgery, and just the recovery from the general fact that you underwent procedure, that sort of thing. And then just getting comfortable enough that you could be fitted with something that you could play with. But anyway, she'll be out there. And also Janaea Robertson was on that list. She's not on anymore. And Anderson Williams also off that list. We know that she played for the Wild U23 last Friday. So I would expect that she will be available.
Yeah, for the first time this year. So 3 players who are on the injured list still, Jason. New signing Ali Hess, who you reached out to the club and inquired about and heard that she is close to a return. Inaugural signing for Kuna Mutaj. We've asked the club for a status on her. And Kaylee Books, who took a knock near the end of the Wild's last match.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember in that match exactly what happened, but I do remember thinking that it didn't look very good. So I'm not totally shocked that she's out of action, but yeah, Ali Hess, it sounds like we're going to see hers pretty soon. I don't know if it's not going to be this week, but probably within the next week or two, I think she's going to be dressed. But Scott, the Wild have 23 players under contract, and in the NSL, you can dress 20 players, and they actually have 20 healthy players. So in theory, for this match coming up in Halifax, they could dress a full roster of 20 players and not have to include any youth players.
Which they did do when they traveled to Montreal not that long ago.
They've had youth players in the roster every match this year. They've never been in a position where they could dress 20 senior squad players.
So this is the fittest the Wild team squad has been in 2026.
Yeah, I don't think it's even close. I think this is, I think that having 20 healthy players, I don't know, like I could probably go back and look at the spreadsheet, the infamous spreadsheet I keep. I would be surprised if they've had more than 17 or 18 healthy players, senior squad players this year. And right now they have 20.
Okay, well, that bodes well. The other thing worth mentioning, Jason, is we just looked this up, and the transfer window for the NSL is opening Monday, I believe.
Yeah, June 15th. So we know that at the last post-match press conference, interim coach Sinead McSherry said that they were planning on bringing in some players for trials. And we already have a reasonably strong suspicion that Izzy Monk could be close to signing with the team. So yeah, we'll have to see, I guess, what ends up happening. But they do have 2 open roster spots available. And in theory, if they did have a player that was considered to have a season-ending injury, they could have another roster spot available. But 2 for sure.
So last thing I think we should mention is the head-to-head, as these two teams did actually play each other not that long ago. It was not very pretty, Jason. A 4-0 win at McMahon Stadium for Halifax in May.
Hi, this is Drew Fisher, FIFA referee. You're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, now it's time for our interview for this week. Scott, this interview you did solo, and somebody that you have a long history with, Gord Franson, and I listened to the interview obviously and got it all ready for the episode. Really interesting stuff from a historical perspective, and just to kind of get a bit of a feel of what things are like behind the scenes with the Dinos.
Yeah, behind the scenes is definitely the expression for Gord. Has a very quiet but integral role for the Dinos. The person who's booking the hotels or organizing the plane trips or the bus rentals, organizing the fundraising, the kind of stuff that is very crucial to the operation of the team, but maybe doesn't get recognized as much.
All right, let's run that interview now.
I'd like to welcome Gord Franson to the podcast. Gord is the team manager for the University of Calgary Dinos men's soccer team and the official convener for Canada West Soccer. He's been with the UFC men's soccer team for 39 years, since 1988, and was named to the Dinos Hall of Fame in 2024. Gord, welcome to our podcast. So to start, can you tell some of our listeners a little bit about your role and what you do with the men's team?
Well, I think that my job is to basically, our head coach is Ramon Mifflin, and I think his job is to manage the players on the field, and my job is to get the players to the field and all the things that are involved in that. So I look after all the administration. Our soccer club, we're not a fully funded program at U of C. So we have to generate funds to keep the program going and then administer those funds in a way that meets all the objectives that we need.
For sure. And of course, I was involved with the Dinos program for a brief period. So I met you way back in 2012, and I always knew you were doing so much behind the scenes, right? Like there's a lot that goes into running a university soccer program that maybe people don't always think about, but like the phone calls that need to be made, the bookings, the hotel stuff, the bus, the charters, that kind of thing. So that's all you behind the scenes doing that?
Yeah, I work in conjunction with Eddie Bardana,
Okay.
who has been with us a long time. Originally was a player on the team, and Eddie is now the owner of Kick Sporting Goods in Calgary as well. But he looks after a lot of the financing part of the project, and I help him with that, and then do all the administration stuff, which you send it. Just to give some rough idea, it costs getting close to almost $250,000 to run the program on a yearly basis. So that requires a fair bit of work in terms of generating the money to do that, and then making sure it's all spent efficiently.
How did you become involved? Because I know a little bit about, I think it started with an assistant coaching role.
Well, I've been involved in sports a long time, either coaching or managing. I mean, I started off with softball and hockey in the early years, and was with that for a long time. Eventually, I became involved with the Calgary Blizzards. It would have been in the early 1970s, and I was with them for a long time. After a while, I ended up being involved in coaching and managing the U18 program. And we found over the years that a lot of the graduates of that program went on to play men's soccer at UFC. And in 1987, actually, after Peter Welsh, who had been the long-term coach for the UFC, retired, Andy Gibbs took over as head coach. And coincidentally, at the time, he was a roommate, and he asked me one day if I would look at coming to help him with the team. And that was 1988. And I didn't expect to be around for what's now turned out to be 39 years, but I'm still involved.
And what keeps you involved? Like, what keeps you coming back to this role year after year?
Well, I mean, in part is just the challenge of keeping the program going. You know, there's certainly been some obstacles over time as time went by, but I think it's just the opportunity to be involved at the sport at a high level. Fortunately, in Canada now, you know, we do have some levels of soccer at a higher level than it certainly was in the late 1980s. But you know, at one time the university level was almost the top level, just below the national program, and it's still at a high level today. And just the opportunity to be involved with that, I think, is the reason I keep doing it. As well as it's really a pleasurable experience working with athletes. When they come to the university, if everything goes right, we'll have them for 4 or 5 years, and then they go off and spend the rest of their life. But I think over the course of time now, we've graduated 399 men's players out of the program. This is actually in total our 53rd year of the program coming up. And those gentlemen are involved in different careers all over literally the world today. And it's truly a pleasure just to have the opportunity to work with them.
It's so cool that you know exactly how many players have graduated. And that kind of leads into another question I wanted to ask you about, which is the stats keeping, because that's another thing I know you for, and for kind of being that encyclopedia of the team, because I think it was you who told me when I was writing for the Dinos website, when it was, I think, the first time that the Dinos had beaten the U of A in Edmonton, or had beaten them twice in one season, and like factoids like that. And can you talk about that side of the position as well?
When I first got involved, there really wasn't a lot of stats kept. Now, that wasn't just in university. I think it was in soccer in general. It was sort of viewed as some ways as Americanization of the sport. I think in the early days, you know, the old traditional sort of European way of playing soccer is not a lot of stats were kept. And I think I came on at a time where people were starting to realize that stats could be a little more important in terms of how we prepare for games and that sort of thing. So I started keeping stats just for our own team at the time. And it turned out after I had done that for a year at UC, there really hadn't been the Canada West, which is the league we play in, hadn't really been doing much in the way of stats either. And they also felt the need at that time that they needed probably have someone looking after soccer to some extent, doing scheduling and keeping track of stats and all-star teams and all that sort of thing. So in 1989, I got appointed the soccer convener for Canada West. And if you look back in those days, there only were there were 6 men's teams and 5 women's teams back in the late 1980s. And obviously, you know, as time has gone on, Canada West has virtually doubled in size. We're now up to 15 women's teams and 13 men's teams. And next year, Simon Fraser is coming on board. So that'll be another team in each of the men's and women's leagues as well. So I did the stats for Canada West for 33 years until COVID came along. And obviously we didn't play that year. And then after that, they've gone to a lot of sort of really mechanized kind of systems for stats. So stats are still important, but I haven't been doing them for Canada West since 2020.
Okay, all right. And I think you talking about the mechanization of stats keeping. I wanted to ask about how that has evolved, and I guess that's kind of the answer to that question, right? Which is,
Well,
before.
I can remember in the old days, getting the game sheets and then sort of putting something together every Sunday night, and then standing beside the fax machine for the better part of an hour or two, sending it out all that way, because we literally, honestly, didn't have computers and all those kind of things in those really early days. Obviously, that's changed. There's now stats programs out there. The league has reached the point, so all our games now are on TV. All our games have people doing stats at the games, and that's all rolled up into more long-term situations with the stats. So it's just as we've had a growth in teams, we've sort of had a growth in how we manage teams, how we manage programs.
What would you say have been some of the highlights with your time with the Dinos?
Well, certainly 2019, we actually managed to qualify for the national championships. Two teams every year from there's four conferences in Canada, and two teams from each conference go to the national championships every year. And for the very first time in 2019, the UC men's team actually got to go to a national championship in Montreal. For many years, in addition to being soccer convener, I was also involved in the national level and sort of with the coaching association. So I've been to many national championships over the years, but never ever with my own team. So that was certainly a highlight in that year.
I think my last question for you, Gord, is about something I did mention in the intro, which is that you were named to the Dinos Hall of Fame class of 2024. What did that feel like when you found out that you were inducted?
Well, that was certainly was not expected whatsoever. I never ever sort of thought that I would be in that category. I was inducted as a builder, and I think certainly, I guess the important thing is it sort of was a bit of a recognition that the work, time, and effort and work that I put in was recognized by the university as being important, and that certainly has to be satisfying to anyone. But I think it also reflects that I couldn't have done it myself. There certainly were an awful lot of people along the way that helped with that, and we keep the program going, and so that was a real honor to receive that.
Mm-hmm. I guess I do have one more question for you, Gord, which is where you see this program going in the future. I think, since I was involved over a dozen years ago, I feel like I've seen it grow and evolve, but I feel like it can go even further in some ways.
We're going in now to our third year with our the latest head coach that we have, and I think we're certainly all very impressed with the way that he's come to the program and brought it up to a high level. He's well respected within the league and certainly with the players. So to keep that continuity is going is important. I think some of the, hopefully we are sort of moving in the direction of getting the program fully funded. There were extra funds have been supplied in the last year or two to what we have. That would be sort of an ultimate goal to reach equal funding to other soccer programs across the country, as well as within U of C. There's a strong possibility that U of C will be hosting the men's and women's national championships for the very first time, either in 2027 or 2028. Those will likely be held at McMahon Stadium, and that would be in November. So that's coming up, and I would think the big news is that we certainly seem very positively moving in the direction of building what will be called Dinos Stadium at the university, which will be a shared facility between soccer, football, and rugby, and built on the university with a turf field and with the realization that it'll also have a dome put over the field in the winter. So we will sort of, as we're moving forward, we're moving in a competitive environment. We're getting financially more solvent, and we look like we're close to solving the facility issue, which has been a long-standing issue at UC.
Awesome. Well, Gord, I like I said, that was my last question for you. I'm glad you brought up the stadium proposal. That's something Jason and I have talked about on this podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the YYC Soccer podcast this week. We really appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate the time that you spent with the program many years ago, and I'm glad I could help out today. Thank you.
Hi, this is Naima Ingleton, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, let's talk some Alberta Premier League. We had a matchup, a doubleheader on Tuesday, and in the doubleheader, we've got one result.
Yeah, that being on the women's side in the matchup between Rangers and Callies. This was a 3-1 win for Rangers. Grace Moore scoring twice, and Eileen Ryu scoring the other one for Rangers. And then Villains, their lone goal came from Darian Plumator.
And ordinarily, there would be a men's matchup following the women's matchup, but I checked the website and it said that the match was postponed. So I got a hold of Villains and just asked them about what happened. There were several thunderclaps, and they decided to postpone the match because of thunder and lightning risks. So that game did not happen and will be rescheduled for another time. I'm not exactly sure when.
Yeah, so that was the only match on Tuesday, but there are a couple of doubleheaders on tap for Friday night, as there always are in the APL.
Villains will be in action at the Villains Dome. They're going to play Calgary Wild U23s at 5, and then they're going to play Cavalry 2 at 7:30.
And then Foothills is going to host BTB, traveling down from Edmonton at Macron Center. Men will kick off at 7:30, the women at 5 p.m. And lastly, over at Weber, Rangers will host St. Albert Impact. Women will get things going at 5 p.m. Men will play at 7:45.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links there to buy Scott's book. It's called Here Come the Cavalry. It's all about the history of pro soccer in Calgary. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media such as Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, where our username is @YYCSoccer403. Thanks for listening.